So basically, I started working in, I think about 2 months ago, and basically, it's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2014 in the memory of Dr. Conrad. And he played an integral role in furthering our understanding of many tropical diseases. And he was also trained a lot, trained and inspired many individuals throughout his lifetime. And he was a humanitarian in every sense, and also even in his medical line. And so basically, that is and his ideology is what the foundation is, the organization is founded upon, as it works to provide cheap yet effective treatment options, especially in developing world. So one of the first things that I started was about molecular diagnostics, in which I basically started by talking about what molecular diagnostics is and how it is interlinked with molecular biology. For example, how it basically like originates from it. And then I talked about how it is used for the treatment of many of the infectious diseases, as well as many different types of cancer, and how it basically looks into the genomic patterns. And basically, because of molecular diagnostics, it makes the whole process of giving the healthcare to people much more faster, and makes the treatment better, as it helps to basically like identify many diseases timely. And also talked about how it is being developed in the low-income settings, and the way that the problems that are there because of it, like in its development, the problems that are there in its development. For example, many of the diseases that are there in many of the developing worlds, and the highest rate of death cause is also big in some countries, is also because of the fact that because of some of the infectious diseases that in other places are basically diagnosed properly due to molecular diagnostics. And then also talked about the work of JCWO in this, and how they basically work to provide it in many different countries like Venezuela. They provided in Venezuela and worked in partnerships with hospitals to basically provide it in I think 15 days. And I also talked about the psychological effects of leukemia on children, in which I basically discussed the importance of diagnosis, which is basically talks about how it helps to improve the response of a patient, and also the way that the doctors are going to deal with it, and basically helps them in timely deciding the treatment that they're going to give. And then I also talked about different types of treatments and gave a brief description of them. For example, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and all of those, some of the radiation therapy and those types of treatments. And I also talked about JCWO's work in this aspect as well. Then I did about the participation of people in clinical trials, in which I basically talked about how basically what clinical trials are, and how basically the history of clinical trials and how they misuse people, and how they were not based upon ethical learning. For example, in the Nazi era, how they basically used the Jews very unjustly in order for their own purpose, in their own medicines and for their own military. Then I talked about how a lot of importance has been given to ethics now. For example, because of many of the different agreements and many of the different treaties, for example, the Helsinki Declaration, which basically defines that there's an importance of consent when they're doing clinical trials, and like a proper study of how it should be done. But still, there are some people in low-income settings, especially, who are still exploited, since usually clinical trials do provide money in healthcare, which they might not be able to get otherwise. And especially like racism is also seen in many cases because of it. Then I also talked about why trials are important, because basically they help to in the development of different treatments. And then I talked about the risks and the barriers, especially in terms of COVID, and how people did not actually believe in the whole process of the trials, because it was really fast and it was really, but I talked about how it found its origin in different terms, and also because of the fact that there's much more funding now, because of which COVID-19 vaccines are developed much faster. And then I talked about the trial registration, which is basically registering and talking about the whole process of the trial as it goes on, which basically helps to eradicate many of the problems that existed before. And then in the mental health in developing versus developed versus developing worlds, talked about the options developing countries, for example, in Pakistan and Kenya, and that's it.